So, welcome back to the Killer Storyteller podcast with me, Rachel Lynch, million copy crime fiction author from the UK, coming to you from London. And thanks so much for joining us again for this episode. And with me, as always, from Australia is my Aussie mate, Kristy Horne. Hi, Kristy.
Hi, Rach. How are you? And you know what? I kind of always want to say g'day because I actually say that a lot. So I hope it doesn't sound too Aussie, as I've got my Kubra hat on with my corks dangling in front of my face.
So, I'm just so chuffed that you actually really say that.
I actually do say g'day a lot. So, g'day, everyone. It's great to be here. And thanks so much for tuning in. And yes, I'm coming to you from Melbourne, Australia, where it's just gotten really dark here. So, it's in the evening time we're recording. But I am so looking forward to discussing our first book, Dark Game, your first book. But before we kick off that, Rach, how you going? It's really great to see you.
Yeah, it's brilliant, Kristy, and it's morning here. So when we record, we try and sort of fit in a time, don't we? And this sort of works for us. It's morning for me, evening for you. I think you've got the harder job, because I sort of slow down in the evening, and most of my writing takes place in the morning when
Oh,
I'm
does it?
when I'm fresh. Definitely by the evening, especially now I can see it's dark outside of your windows. I'd be wanting to, curl up in front of the fire, and watch a crime show on TV. You know what they say about people who relax by watching crime?
Oh, no. What is
It's my
that?
job. Yeah, well, they say that you're a psychopath if you watch crime for pleasure as well. So,
Well, in saying that, we've just binged the whole Unforgotten series.
oh, I love it.
So brilliant, and also
Yeah.
we've just finished watching D.I. Ray.
Yeah. I'm not watching any crime at the moment, although I am watching Mobland, which is slightly different. It's more sort of organised crime, isn't it? With Tom Hardy. Yeah, Tom Hardy's new one. It's very good. And Helen Mirren is like the matriarch of the mob family, and she's brilliant. She's such a great bitch.
Hey, I got to tell you something really awesome that I found out. One of my colleagues at work, she's following along, and she's just finished reading book one, and she's on to book two as well. So we do
Wow.
a weekly walk and a walking meeting at work, and yeah, so she's been telling me all about book one, Dark Game, and she said, "Oh God, it was so scary."
Oh, apologise on my behalf. Yeah, it is. I think my husband says that's my grittiest, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about that
Maybe it's for
either.
some people, maybe it's not.
Yeah, we might need a poll, listeners. What do you think? Is it Rachel's grittiest book?
Oh, that's awesome.
So, how about we crack on with our first book review?
Yeah, it's getting behind the themes of the book, well, all of them, aren't we? Book by book. And I think that we decided that, each one of them deserves its own podcast because there's
Definitely.
so much going on. And also her life changes throughout throughout the journey. And we really have to say up front that, we're trying very hard not to give away any spoilers. So
That
if you haven't read the book that we're on, we're not going to share any endings. We're not going to share any twists. We're just discussing like the themes of the story, the storylines, the characters, the setting, that sort of thing, the flavor of that particular book.
Yeah, that's right. So, this one is called Dark Game: When the Stakes Are High, Deadly Prices Are Paid. The first time I read this book, Rach, was on my phone using Hoopla or Apple Books. I can't remember what it was, but I finished it in 3 days. It was thrilling from start to finish. Absolutely loved it. And I've just reread it again, and I've made lots of notes in the book, and typed up a whole lot of notes to chat with you. So I've got like 1 gazillion questions here. We're going to try and get through as many as we can. But the story's incredible. I instantly loved D.I. Kelly Porter, and the first few pages are just absolutely brilliant. So it had me straight away. What we've got for you guys is a couple of standard questions we're going to ask Rach each time for each book. And I think this gives a really good summary of Rachel and also about the book as well. So the first one, Rach, is when was this book written?
Yeah, so well, it's almost 10 years ago now. I wrote it back in 2016.
Right. And whereabouts were you when you wrote this book?
So all the Kelly Porters have been written in Hertfordshire, where I live, which is kind of in between London and Cambridge, staring out over my garden, which that's where I get my inspiration from.
All of the books, all of the Kelly Porter books. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And how long did it take you to write this book?
So Dark Game took me about 5 weeks to write. Now there is a little story behind that because that is really quick. And I think that every writer is different. So you have people who spend a lot of time on the creation, and then you have people who spend a lot of time on editing or a little time on editing and that, the whole process. So the process is different for everybody. I tend to spend a relatively short amount of time on the actual creation of the story. So I believe, because I do it sort of by instinct rather than notes, I kind of get the story down, and I kind of think, well, you can't edit a blank page, right? So you've got to have something to edit. So I get the story down, so that doesn't take me very long, and then I start redrafting and pulling around and playing around once I've got to know the characters. So yeah, 5 weeks, really quick.
And did you have a plan for the entire series about D.I. Kelly Porter right from the very beginning?
I had when I first got my agent and my publisher, I had three. So I'd already written the first three stories. Yeah, because these things take time. Getting an agent, it's very very competitive out there. The industry is brutal. I think my agent gets something in the region of, I don't know, about 40,000 manuscripts a year, something like that, and he takes on maybe one or two new clients. So that just gives you an impression of how difficult it is to get representation in the industry. Now, you can publish without representation, you can self publish, you can go direct to somebody like Amazon. Um, but I made the decision a long time ago that I was going to wait for representation. So I met my agent in 2016, and by then I had three Kelly books ready to go. And he said to me, "This can be a series." It just so happened that we sold them in threes to the publisher. So they bought the first three. And then my contracts from then have been rolling threes, which is why I'm up to 12 at the moment.
Fantastic. And each book has a theme. And what's the theme of this book?
So it's gritty and dark. It certainly isn't cozy crime. It touches on things like organized crime, sex trafficking, prostitution, national and global drug dealing. Now, taken on their own, they're really shocking, very topical subjects. It's only last year that in the Lake District, in a little village called Ambleside, a hotel was closed down for these very issues.
Really?
Um, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So, when I have been contacted on social media and said, um, this it's too dark, or this sort of thing doesn't go on. Well, it does, and we see it in the UK news all the time, about people trafficking. So I start with a bang, that's for sure.
It's set in the Lake District. Each book have different seasons. So what season is Dark Game?
Yeah, Dark Games in the summer, and I think each book being set in a different season is really important, and it's a part of that particular story that's going on. In Dark Game, it is about the people trafficking behind the transient tourism population. So it had to be the summer. That's when the hotels are most busy, and that's where a few of my main characters, the three girls who are illegal workers, they've come to make money during the summer season. So that was really important.
All right, guys, we have got some reader point of view questions for Rachel right now for Dark Game. Rach, as a reader, we get so invested in Kelly's journey, her return to the Lake District, her past with the Met and Matt the Twat, and her relationship. Sorry, I just love saying that. I'm going to keep saying it. What do you think it is about Kelly that makes readers connect with her so strongly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's her backstory. She's normal. She fails and she picks herself up and she brushes herself off. She has worries and needs that are just like anybody else's, and she's got a story. She doesn't come to Dark Game as a blank page. She's already lived a life,
Mm.
um, not only in Cumbria where she grew up, but she's lived a life in London as well because she studied to be a detective in the Met. So in Dark Game, we meet her as coming home a bit with a tail between her legs because Matt the twat was not only her lover but also her boss, which we know that those things don't usually mix. So it's a bit of a push and a pull. She's been pushed away from London because it didn't quite go as she expected. Matt the twat really threw her under the bus, but she's also been pulled back home because her dad's died. So, I really think it's her normality. She's relatable.
Throughout Dark Game, Rach, there's a real sense that the sleepy towns in the Lake District are hiding dark secrets. What role do you think the setting plays in creating a sense of unease for the reader?
I just think that it lends itself absolutely perfectly to a crime series. You've got the moody weather,
Yep.
you've got the hiding places. I mean, I go back every year because I like I said earlier, I live in Hertfordshire now, but I go back every year and I always find places that surprise me. And I've been walking there since I could walk, literally.
Really?
I
Yep.
think I went up Scarfell Pike when I was about 10 years old. And I still walk past like abandoned shepherd's huts and think, oh, I could hide a body in there.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I love about it is so beautiful and so dramatic and striking. And I think, don't quote me, I think that they have 18 million visitors a year because it's now a UNESCO World Heritage Site as of 2017 as well. That's a lot of people. It is that beautiful. It's gorgeous. And so to me, the idea of this, well, what could go wrong? What's the underbelly underneath it? And I think that's what freaks people out because they're buying toffee in Cartmel, or famous gingerbread in Grasmere, but 2 miles away there's been a hideous murder. So I love that juxtaposition, and it's I think it lends itself to secrets, to the wilderness, to mystery, to hiding reality. So that's yeah, that's what drew me to it initially.
I just have to ask you this question about the twist in the book. And if you're reading along, there's a great twist between a couple of the characters. How did you balance like keeping readers on the edge of their seats while still like planting, clues that they might catch? So I found rereading the books that I picked up on a few things.
I think that this is where my earlier sort of strategy that I touched on comes in because when I mean, I can only speak for myself. I know I've got lots of friends who are writers who plan a lot, and then lots of friends who are writers who don't plan so much, and they're more like me, and they just sort of get it on the page and then they edit. So with that model, what happens is I find is that you get the story down and you create these characters, and I've got to say I do really really love, perhaps too much, creating baddies. And it's not a spoiler to say that Marco and Teresa Jolliffe and Darren
Yeah.
Beckett are baddies. They're really vile people. Now,
Yeah.
we could talk forever about why they're vile, but that, for the purposes of a crime novel, it doesn't matter. You've got to have your vile people, but they're particularly nasty, aren't they? And I think that if
Oh, Darren is.
oh yeah, and the thing is that they're very selfish, aren't they? They're
Mm,
all doing what they're doing for their own gain. So, Marco is the kingpin, isn't he? He's the one who's running it all. And none of these are spoilers. Teresa is kind of the brains, isn't she? But she's always walking a tightrope because she's the beauty as well. And then Darren is the sort of get things done guy, but he's so
yeah.
useless. He screws up and he doesn't get anything done, and he's just an absolute idiot. Um, so he's like the small town criminal, isn't he? But the thing is that I didn't get to know any of these things until I'd written it, and then I started to chew over, and I go for walks, I walk the dog, I walk around, and I cook, and I'm thinking about it. I go to bed and I'm thinking about it. I'll be driving and I'll be thinking about it. And it's only these chewing over processes where I think, that'd be a good twist. And because you can't deliver your twist too early. They've got to be fully cooked twists. And so you've got to cook them first, and then you've got to go back and insert them. That's what I do. They don't come as I'm writing the first draft. I think you'd have to be a bona fide genius for that to happen organically. So the twists are worked on, and they come from the characters.
The twist that I'm talking about, you'll have to read the book, and you might already be up to speed on what we're talking about here. But that's an absolute ripper. I'm going to scroll right down to this next question here, Rach. It's question 6 on your screen there. So we've got the show notes, guys, so we can both see what we're talking about. But you opened Dark Game with such a bang. Those first few pages for me were utterly gripping. Couldn't read through them quick enough. What was your intention with that powerful opening? First book, first couple of pages. It's just so much information, really, to hook the readers in. Sounds like a really stupid question now that I'm asking it, but
Yeah, I think it had to be, because this was that it wasn't, like you say, it wasn't just the first chapter in a book. It was the first time people were meeting Kelly. So you know um decisions are going to be made on whether readers are going to take her forward or not. The market is so busy at the moment. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of detectives out there, hundreds, if not thousands, of crime books out there at the moment. It's a really popular genre. So um that there had to be some things that were hooking straight away. So obviously the case is one of them. That's the obvious one.
yep,
That's where
yep.
most crime is differentiated. But she had to be hooking too. And I think that her her worries about fitting in, and her worries about doing her job properly, but also her worries about her personal life too. So it had to be a combination of really explosive moments that drew people in. But having said that, I think that it's important for all books to start like that. So after Dark Game, I did get in. I sort of have that as a style now, where I start with something pretty shocking without giving anything away. The opening of Bitter Edge #4 comes to mind, with the young girl standing on the edge of the cliff. Um, so I think it's really, really important that those first few pages, and it's not a coincidence that when agents and publishers are looking at your work, they only want the first 3 chapters to read.
Oh, is that right? There you
Yeah.
go. This book, Dark Game, weaves together people smuggling, child abduction, sex trafficking, offshore money laundering, and more. How did you go about approaching and crafting such a complex plot?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I think it was organic, really, because when you're talking about organized crime, you've got to have layers of people. So there's always got to be somebody at the top, and there's got to be
Yep.
somebody at the bottom, and there's got to be lots of shades of different people in between. So a successful organized crime racket is going to be national, it's going to be global. And I had the Workington port there in northwest Cumbria. You've got the Isle of Man connection, which is a tax haven, that lent into it as well. My husband at the time was working for fraud at a big bank, so I learnt a lot from him about money laundering. At the time, I don't know if you remember, but there was a big story about the Azerbaijan laundromat that was going on. That was, back in 2016, the banks were all really paranoid about where their money was going and whether it was being used, whether they were being used to clean money globally. And a lot of them were fined. And this is when, fraud and values and standards really changed in big banks. They were held to account for all this stuff. So there was a lot online to research.
Right.
It was all there and all of the pieces, and then I had to just put different characters in different layers. And so I had my local characters who were the people on the ground, doing the horrible things. But then I had like a guy in prison, for example, which again is really realistic because they can still run organised crime
Yeah.
from prison. So I interviewed prison officers, I interviewed a governor, I interviewed some really interesting people. And like I said, my husband helped with the financial crime because they're doing it for a reason. And usually crime is done, and unless, you take your serial killing psychopaths out of it, most crime is done for sex or money. And in Dark Game, it's money. And there's a few people who are getting very rich off these horrible, horrible industries.
We'll get to some of those in a moment, but I was going to ask you. We touched on this in an earlier podcast, but Kelly Porter returns to her hometown under a bit of a cloud. How much does that personal baggage shape who she is as a detective in the first book? Because it's quite important, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that, in Dark Game, we meet her at a real crossroads in her life. And again, I think to start a series, that's a really fantastic way to start, because you're then, as a reader, you know that you're going to go on this journey with her. It's not just a Tuesday afternoon and she's just getting on with her job and she's sat at her desk trawling through cases. You're actually starting at a really important moment of her life where she's had this she had great hopes for the Met in London. She was part of this huge murder squad, really cutting edge stuff. She was at the top of her game. Then things went bad because of Matt the Twat. We'll get him in there again. Just say that a few more times. And so she is coming home under a cloud, and so you've got lots of questions as a reader. How's she going to fit in? Is she going to cope? What's she going to do to reinvent herself? So as a reader, you're really there at the beginning of her reinvention, and I really like that. I was drawn to that as a writer.
For those that have read Dark Game, you'll know that at the heart of it is the case of Lottie Davis, and we talked about this briefly in an earlier podcast, but this is central to this book. It's haunting this storyline, Rach. I'm really keen to know what drew you to writing about such a tragic crime, and how did it shape the emotional tone of the story?
I think when I'm writing a crime book, any of my crime books, it could be a Kelly or it could be one of my standalones. I really believe that for any human story, you need light and shade, and it's got to be a gentle touch between the two of them, because we've got to have contrast. And so the case of Lottie is devastatingly awful. But what it allowed me to do was it allowed me to take Kelly to her mother's house and and sit
Yes.
in her living room and
Yeah.
look at Lottie's portrait on the wall. And
Yeah.
so you're balancing the just, I'm almost speechless. The terrible things that happened to the 10-year-old girl, you're balancing that with the most wonderful part of humanity, which is Kelly wanting to reach out to Jenny, her mother, and catch the shit that did this. And that is where the story is. That is only where the story is Kelly's need to do good. And I thought that this story really encapsulated that. And it just started like any of these ideas do: little girl, red dress, abduction, in the middle of nowhere, watching eagles. And then I thought, right, mother, how would mother feel? It obviously, without giving too much away, as you can imagine, it devastated the family.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
insert this detective who, because this, let's face it, this case has been dropped, and by the end of Dark Game, you know why it was dropped and who perhaps had a hand in making it get dropped. However, for Kelly, knew from the Met, She doesn't know why it's been dropped. She doesn't she just wants to get to the bottom of this horrendous case, and she's like, why is this case being dropped? I'm going to look into this. That's how she meets the mother. That's how she gets to know the story of how Lottie was watching eagles with her family. And so it enables you to insert this huge amount of emotion into a really horrible story. And I think if crime books are just about the crime, then there's no room for that humanity. So that I believe that my crime books need that light and shade. And so her case enabled me to do that.
And we see that, Rach, with also the setting between the Lake District and like the dark, gritty crime against the storyline at the same time. That must be fun to kind of write as well, because you, in your mind, you see it, the beauty in the district as well, the lakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And every time, I mean, we're recording this as well, aren't we? And hopefully this visual will be out on YouTube, and you can see behind me, I've got a map of the Lake District on my wall, and so I just have to sort of scoot back there. Um, and I'm there. I'm a very visual writer, so these images are always flashing through my head when I'm writing about them. Um, and it doesn't matter where I am in the Lake District. It could be, just the Ullswater Way, for example, which stretches the whole of Ullswater. But if you're on your own on that track and the light's fading and your mobile phone's not working and you come across a forest and there's no way around it, you've got to go through it, straight away there, the
Yeah.
beauty and the tranquility and the UNESCO World Heritage Site status kind of goes out the window. You got yourself a crime story. So yeah, I love that juxtaposition about it.
One of my favourite characters in this book is Ted Wallace, the chief coroner for the Northwest, who's been a coroner for 40 years. There's a story, the autopsy scene in this book. It's just so authentic. I haven't been to an autopsy, mind you, but what kind of research goes into making scenes like this feel really authentic without overwhelming the readers? I personally loved it.
Yeah, I love it as well, and I think you can probably tell. And and again, all crime fiction. That's why there's always something for everybody. There's room for everybody's style. Mine is very much inclusive of the autopsy, and Ted is a really important character, and he's still with me on book 13. So Ted's work is really integral to Kelly's investigations, and I always have autopsy scenes. And my publisher has actually said to me, "Can you write a series just on him?" 'Cause
Oh, really?
yeah. They want a coroner series because
Oh.
those scenes are just so juicy. Um,
Yeah.
and it's amazing what you can find online. I mean, I've spoken to funeral directors. I've spoken to
Oh, right.
mortuary technicians. I would love to go and watch an autopsy for real because I've got quite a strong stomach, but I haven't had the opportunity. I nearly did, and then COVID hit, and they
Oh, right.
yeah. So I'd like to organise that, but it's amazing what you can find online. So I watched one which you couldn't see what the pathologist was doing. You could just see his head and shoulders, and he was actually he was talking you through what he was doing.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Yep.
you can research anything really. I mean, I'm amazed that the police haven't knocked at my door and tried to arrest me
Yeah.
for what I've Googled.
Yeah.
They must. I
Now,
must be on some watch list, and they must go. Oh, she's a crime writer. She's a psycho. Leave her alone.
what about, incognito? Is that can you use Google Incognito so it doesn't
Oh,
get
I don't
tracked at
know.
police?
Yeah, maybe I could switch that on. Oh, I'm worried now.
It's I love Kelly's relationships in Dark Game. It's the first book, so it's setting the scene with her mum, her sister, her new romance in Johnny. There's so many layers here, and it's also really raw as well. Kelly's such a complex person. Why was it important to show her vulnerability alongside her toughness in Dark Game?
I think again, it's the light and shade. It's the good and the bad, the light and the dark. It's and also to make her relatable, because she's got to be 3, 4, 5, 6 dimensional. She can't just be 2 dimensional. She can't just be this detective who solves crime. It's just not good enough. It's not interesting enough, and it's not real. And I think that, Kelly's relatable because she's quite ordinary. She has the same desires and same needs. And so it was actually a conversation with my agent about Kelly's family, because I'm really lucky to have the agent that I've got. Peter Buckman has been in the industry for a long time. I mean, he started working for Penguin in his 20s in New York, and he's now in his 80s. So he's been in this industry, yeah, for 60 years, and I feel so lucky that I met him. He's incredible, and we were having a chat about Kelly's family once he'd read the first couple of books, and he actually, I think at the time, Kelly's family wasn't quite as dysfunctional, and I think
Okay.
it was his sort of nudge, and he said, perhaps make her give her a few problems, more problems in her family to make
Okay.
it a bit realer, because we I don't think anybody has the perfect family. There's always tension. So I thought, oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
a really good point, actually. Maybe she's a bit too perfect. So that's where the tension came from. And that's what planted the seed about, maybe her father was this incredible detective. Sorry, he wasn't a detective. He was in uniform, but he's an incredible policeman. But he was a bit of an authoritarian at home. She's got this sister, and they used to be close, but now they're not, because they're so different. She left. She doesn't want children, whereas Nikki's had 3 children and she stayed. And she's perhaps
Yeah.
resentful because, she shouldered a lot of the illness of her father. So, there's real tension there. And also, you've got this lovely dynamic of Golden Bollocks coming home, Joseph in his amazing Technicolor coat, returning, the prodigal daughter. Oh, Kelly's home. Nikki's not going to like that,
Yeah.
is she? So there's lovely tension there as well. And there's tension with her mum because, Wendy is very old fashioned. She's got this 36-year-old daughter coming and, trashing her house and staying out all hours, and she's ill as well, as we find out in Dark Game. So that, I think that tension is, without being too heavy on it, is just normal. Kelly's got more
Yeah.
going on in her life than these awful cases, which is normal.
And the relationship that she has with her mum is really interesting as she comes home. She moved into the family home before she gets her new place, and then also her, not giving any spoilers away here, but her mum's a bit sick. So yeah, it's a really interesting relationship there. She wants to be, going out and enjoying herself and not bringing home any men.
Yeah, she's torn in different directions, isn't she? She's a
Yeah,
36-year-old woman. She's not 14. And I think sometimes Wendy treats her like she's 14, and she's not. And so there's another sort of stress, in her life. And I think that Johnny provides real relief, to that, because he's on many levels, he's quite simple. He's a volunteer for the mountain rescue. He's clearly financially okay to be able to do that, although she hasn't found out how he makes his money yet. And he's very casual and pretty chilled, and she needs that. She really needs
yeah.
that. So that's another lovely addition, I think, to her dynamic.
Dark Game has many, many different type of storylines that kind of beautifully weave together. There's some epic twists in this book as well, with Marco and Sasha and Teresa Jolliffe. The question is, did you always know how it would end, or did the twist evolve as you wrote it? Interested to know that.
I think a combination of both. So I think when I start a story, I usually know how it ends, because that's how I start. I start with the big sort
Okay.
of finale in my head. So what is
Ah,
it that's actually happened? I know, and everyone's different. All writers are different. But I start with, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if? And then I create the characters, and then I build up to that. And as that process goes along, you always find that things change and twists come and go, and characters slightly change, and maybe even your ending changes. So there's a few sort of side plots in Dark Game. So for example, in the opening chapters, we find that a little newborn baby has actually been found abandoned.
Baby Dale.
your baby Dale, and they name him Baby Dale because they don't know
Yeah.
who he is, and he was found in Patterdale, which is a gorgeous little village at the foot of one of my favourite climbs, which is Place Fell. And there's a White Lion pub at the beginning of the walk, which is
Oh,
iconic,
right.
yeah, for that area. Loads of campers, and the Green Lead slate mine is actually a real mine where Baby Dale was found. So all of these places are real in my head, and I've been to all of them, and it's really isolated. There's a really fast rushing beck that goes right by the mine, so I can hear the rushing water, and it would have been
Yeah,
really awful,
yeah,
this baby being abandoned, but we find
yeah,
out why. So that family dynamic played a
yeah.
big part, I think, as we went through the book than I originally anticipated. But yeah, so it does develop organically, but I normally start with the main deed. Who did
Right,
it?
okay,
Why did
yeah,
they do it? Because I don't think all crime has to be a whodunit. Sometimes it's interesting. I think Dark Game is more of a why done it,
yeah.
because you do actually meet a lot of the baddies along the way. So you do kind of know what they're doing and who's doing it. So it's more of a why done it, and who's going to solve it. If that makes sense.
There's one little scene in Dark Game where Kelly's mum is involved, incidentally in assisting somebody to,
Yes,
um, Baby Dale's mum to get out of a public
yes,
toilet. You'll have to read the book to know what I'm talking about, but, I love that little twist there. So, that's not giving
yeah.
away anything, guys, but it's a really, really cool way that you weaved her mum into that storyline. That was so, so clever.
I really love writing that, yeah, because it just shows so much about Wendy, doesn't it?
You introduce Kelly's new team in this book, and she's got such a lovely team around her, and we get to know them as we read through the books. But how did you go about building the dynamic between them? Who should we be keeping an eye on as the series progresses without giving away anything there?
Yeah, I think that, as any team, I think you need a little bit of everything, don't you? And so for the purposes of a story, you can't have, 5 people who are doing all of the same things and have got the same characters. So, you've got young Emma, Emma
Yeah,
Hyde, who, she's really clever, very intelligent, and she's a thinker. She's kind of Kelly's thinker, and she comes up with some, really interesting hypotheses. And then you've got the older and wiser Kate Umshaw, who is Kelly's second in command. She brings a very different flavour to the team. Safe pair of hands, and she's a plodder. She gets the work done, and Kelly can rely on her. She's
yeah,
also got a wealth of experience personally because she's got 3 teenage daughters. And then you have Dan, there's another man who comes in a bit later, called Rob. You've got Will Phillips in Dark Game as well. So,
yeah,
um, and he's very experienced. He's a bit sort of rough around the edges. One of those detectives who kind of throws his whole world into the cases. And actually, to answer your question, all of them go through and develop in their different ways. And I kind of bring in an interesting sideline on one at a time
yes,
with each book. So on one of them, it might be Will Phillips' backstory and what happens to him. And another one, I look a bit closer to Emma. And then you've got the new guy Dan and the new guy Rob, and so they go on. And I also in the books develop Kate and Kelly's relationship, because that's a blossoming friendship that Kelly really needs. She needs people she can rely on. So, and then obviously outside of the crime team, you've got Ted. So Kelly and Ted's relationship
yeah,
blossoms as well. And he's about the same age as John Porter, her father. So, she kind of looks to him as a bit of a father figure without her realizing it. She doesn't do it on purpose. I think they've just got a nice
yeah.
relationship.
I love the way that that relationship blossoms, and you can see it as it progresses through the book. One thing I wanted to say was about Rob Shawcross. I've been keeping a cast list of all of because I'm going through all the books and kind of making my own little mud map. Rob Shawcross, he's got a wife called Mia.
Yeah.
Mia loves to discuss the crime cases with Rob when he gets home from work. But what gets put out on the media by Kelly and what the public know about the cases are obviously different to what's known inside the incident room. Like me is like trying to solve the case for Rob. And she's so far off the mark.
From what she's seen on the news. Yeah, yeah.
That was really, really clever. I love the way you did that with his wife. It was really, really funny.
And I bet that goes on, right? Because we see such a different story, don't we, what they decide to release to the press.
Hey, we're just about coming up to our final question here in Dark Game. I've got something absolutely hilarious to ask you, Rach, but this is such a fantastic book. It's the first book in the series. Really loved it, and I loved it even more when I've just finished rereading it. But there's something I have to ask you, Rach. It's about MasterChef Australia and the the MasterChef Australia reference. This was just so funny when I got to this part in the book. I loved reading it. Then when Darren was watching MasterChef Australia, and then I think he went to Love Island or something. But Tim Bone, who is on MasterChef, he's also a friend of ours. If you're listening, I know you will really love this. Tim Bone's on MasterChef Australia, so he's a great guy.
Oh,
But that was an absolute, in Australian Aussie slang, pisser, Rach.
oh, brilliant. I mean, he had to watch something, didn't he? And, he's in this flat and he's a bit bored and he's taking some drugs and he's like, oh, he's flicking around the TV and MasterChef Australia comes on. I mean, I had to make it something. And I am officially, okay, I even trump you on this. I am MasterChef Australia's biggest fan ever, globally.
That's
I mean, it's
so good.
indisputable. Okay, we're not even going to discuss it. And when I saw that Tim Bone was actually on Back to Win, this series, which is starting soon, isn't
Yeah.
it? Oh my God,
Yep,
I'm so
yep.
excited.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love being able to just sort of put in a little sprinkle of what I might be doing, because I could just imagine him, this like horrendous guy who is just the yes man for this awful sort of organized crime lord, and he's watching something so normal and entertaining as MasterChef Australia. It was just a lovely moment, and I couldn't resist, and I had to make it my favorite program ever. And good luck,
Oh,
Tim.
that is so
Back to Win. Yes.
All right. Well, when you come out to Australia, Rach, we'll take a road trip to go and visit Tim. He's got his own shop now. He's just opened up Tim's Toasties.
Oh, wow.
They are absolutely epic. We could do another whole hour on Tim's Toasties. So
And we could do another whole hour on the Adelaide Book Festival as well, couldn't we? I'm hoping to actually
yeah,
come out there in early 2026 and see you guys and make it coincide with the book festival, and hopefully,
wow, that'd be great.
get stocked up and maybe do a few talks. That'd be amazing. Thanks, Kristy. It's been an amazing episode, hasn't it? It's been really good to get into, the deep bones of Dark Game, and the first in the series of 12, soon to be 13. I've loved it. I've loved speaking to you about it, and thank you so much for such incredible questions and taking questions from, social media as well, and seeing what other readers are saying.
The next book that we'll be diving into is Deep Fear, which is book number 2. So if you haven't read it, do it now. Then you can follow along with us on the next episode. And we'd love to hear from you, where you're up to in the series. Of course, we won't be giving away any spoilers, so anybody can join in at any time. And remember, you can listen to us on Spotify, YouTube Music, and also be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.
That's amazing. Thank you, Kristy. And if you've got any thoughts on what we've been talking about today's chat, drop us a line and we'll take your questions. We'd love to hear from you.
Sounds great. All right, Rach, good to see you. We'll see you again soon, and thanks so much for listening.
See you next time.